You're watching San Francisco Rising with Chris Manners. Today's special guest is Brooke Jenkins.
Hi, I'm Chris Manners and you're watching San Francisco Rising, the show that's about restarting, rebuilding and reimagining our city. Our guest today is San Francisco District Attorney Brooke Jenkins, and she's here to talk to us about the opioid crisis, criminal justice reform and more. Ms. Jenkins, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Let's start by talking about organized retail theft. Now, some jurisdictions across the country have started imposing more severe punishments against people who are caught shoplifting in groups, but that may be applied disproportionately to people, and it doesn't really address the organization behind it all. How can we make sure that we both prosecute the ringleaders behind these crimes and make sure that justice is handed out evenly?
Yes, so you've touched on a part of it, which is making sure that we're getting to the higher levels of organization in this organized retail theft area. And so that's something that my office is very much focused on, working with the police department on, looking at the organized retail theft rings. But we have to make sure that first and foremost, people are being caught who are stealing, and that's a big challenge in our city. And so we've been working with many of the retailers and even the small business owners to ensure that the necessary protocols and procedures are in place to at the very least catch people who are stealing, because what's been happening is they've just been running out of the stores and therefore facing no consequences. And so we have to start there, and we're trying to do more as far as intervention with our youth, who are some of the population that are doing some of these thefts. And so, many of the stores have turned to not having employees detain people who are stealing or try to stop them. And unfortunately, that change in procedure has led to making it very, very difficult for the police department to capture these people who are stealing. And so we've been working with them on a change in their protocol, going back to the way it used to be done, so that we can actually have the opportunity to have people face consequences.
Right. So let's sort of move on to the opioid crisis, which has had a devastating impact across communities all across the country, including San Francisco. How can your office help address this issue?
So the main thing is going back to a point where people feel that there's a consequence for dealing drugs in our city. We cannot treat drug dealing as a victimless crime. We have on average 2 people a day dying from overdose. There are truly victims of this offense. And so what I did was to come in and say, no longer will it be the case that we are decriminalizing drug sales in San Francisco as a DA's office. We have to put consequences back on the table. We have to ensure that the people who are the most egregious sellers, so people who have massive quantities of fentanyl, some of them who have enough to kill almost, half the city. Sometimes people who have weapons and guns, people who have multiple open cases for dealing fentanyl are treated differently than those who are first-time offenders with small quantities. And so I've started to ask that those people be detained in custody while their cases are open. We can't have them back out onto the street hours later, but also really trying to work with the police department and our city in making sure that our laws are enforced. It's the only way that people who are suffering from addiction are actually going to have an opportunity at recovery. Imagine if you are trying to get clean and every 10 steps down the block, you're being offered the drug that you've been addicted to. It's impossible. And so that is one way that we're dealing with the supply side, and we're taking a different approach on the demand side, which is to say, if people are publicly using drugs over and over again, that we believe we need to intervene in those situations. And so the police are citing them, and when somebody reaches 3 of those citations, we then file a complaint, but we route them into a treatment court to try to help them get help.
So they have an option, either you take treatment or you face charges?
Correct, essentially. But we, of course, encourage treatment because that's what these folks need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, San Francisco is known for being at the forefront of criminal justice reform with initiatives such as the Community Justice Center and by pursuing restorative justice. How do you plan to build on these efforts and continue to push for more progressive policies while ensuring we have a fair system that holds people accountable?
Yes, and I've been very clear that accountability comes in many different forms. Historically, DA's offices have used one form, and that's incarceration. The way that I have functioned as a prosecutor over the years is to make sure that we're finding the appropriate form of accountability for each and every person for their specific circumstance. And so for some people, it may be incarceration. For others, it is treatment. It is going to our behavioral health court to help get stabilized for their mental health issue. For some, it is saying, you know what, we want to see you, get a job. And so we're going to require that you go through a trade program so that you can get a skill that allows you to take care of yourself in a different way. And so for me, it's investing in those opportunities, which requires us to be partnering with community-based organizations to identify what programs we can send people to. But I'm very much invested in seeing our collaborative courts, which is what Community Justice Center, Drug Court, Young Adult Court. I'm very much invested in seeing those courts thrive and in encouraging our lawyers to explore those opportunities in their cases.
Right. So now, what role do you think the DA's office can play in addressing the issue of police misconduct and in promoting accountability among law enforcement agencies?
Our job is to prosecute police officers when they commit such misconduct, when they use excessive force in a way that is illegal. And so we will continue to maintain that that's our job and our position. We prosecute all crime in San Francisco. It's not about what your stature is, what your position is, what office you hold. But one thing that I've emphasized is that the law will always be our standard. We can't treat anyone differently based on where they come from, whether they wear a uniform or not. Our standard is the law. And for me, as a Black and Latina woman, it's an issue that is very personal to me. We've had a death in police custody in my family that I've heard about my entire life. I'm raising 2 Black children, including a Black son, who, I will have to talk to about these types of issues as he grows up. I was outraged long before George Floyd. There was Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, the list goes on and on. But as a prosecutor, I have to maintain one standard, and it's whether somebody, according to the law, has committed a crime. And so that's what we always look at.
Absolutely. So then finally, what message do you have for the people of San Francisco, and what do you hope to accomplish during your tenure as district attorney?
I want the people of San Francisco to know that I'm committed to serving the function that the DA's office was designed to serve, which is to make sure that we're promoting public safety across San Francisco. Like I said, we have to have accountability in our city. What we see going on in our streets is the result of people feeling as though there was none. They didn't fear even the police walking by as they were committing a crime, because there was a belief that even if you arrest me, the DA's office isn't going to do anything that I'm afraid of experiencing. And so we want people to have a healthy fear, right, of what a consequence will be. But I also want San Francisco to know that we are a DA's office that stands by the values that we have here in San Francisco, which is second chances, compassion, responsible alternatives to incarceration. Because at the end of the day, accountability has to be what puts people back out onto the street or back out in the community in a fashion where they can succeed. And so that's what I'm committed to as the DA, is making sure that every time somebody cycles into our system, that we are being thoughtful about what that person needs in order to get back on their feet and not create another victim in the future.
Quite right. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate the time you've given us today.
Thank you.
And that's it for this episode. We'll be back with another one shortly. For SFGovTV, I'm Chris Manners. Thanks for watching.